Good afternoon, everyone. I know that I've had a chance to meet some of you in earlier calls this summer, but not everyone. So my name is Teresa Steinkamp. I'm the advising director at the Scholarship Foundation of St. Louis. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And we're going to talk today about essay writing, among other kinds of writing. So I'm going to share my screen, and then I will not be able to see as many of your lovely faces as I can right now. Can you all see the screen, it looks like? Hopefully that worked. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. All right. So we're going to talk about writing through the lens of talking about telling a story, and that is going to cover personal statements and cover letters, and then we're going to talk a little bit about resumes as well. And the idea is that we'll talk for 45 minutes to an hour. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions, and then you can choose one of these three things and send it for some feedback. And then you'll have the opportunity to receive that feedback and work on making adjustments. We've done this actually with Wyman for several years, and until this year, those writing activities have exclusively focused on personal statements. And so we're trying to be a little bit more flexible and offer you some additional choice in what you would like to work on writing and receiving feedback on. So with that, I'm going to walk us through our agenda. We're going to talk about when do we write personal statements, what really is a personal statement, what is a personal statement not, which is equally important, what are the elements of a good personal statement, how do you write a personal statement, what is a resume, how do you write a resume, and what are the elements of a good resume. So we're gonna walk through the personal statement piece first. And although it is not universally true, when I'm talking about personal statements, there's a lot of that information that is very similar to writing a cover letter that might accompany a resume for a job. And so we'll touch on that. So when do we write personal statements? As high school students, one of the big ones that is potentially on the horizon is college admissions. We are aware that not all colleges require a personal statement, but there are many that do or may give you the option to include one as part of your application. And so it's possible that in the next year or two, depending on what your grade level is in high school, you may have the opportunity to write a personal statement as part of an admissions application for college. A lot of scholarship applications require one or honestly more than one personal statement. Some of them require two or three. And so if securing scholarships to pay for college is going to be important for you, then I would be transparent that writing is going to be a part of that. So the vast majority of scholarships are going to require at least one personal statement. Special programs. So an example of this might be that at the Scholarship Foundation, we have an opportunity that allows students to be paired with a donor and write the donor each semester about their academic journey, their challenges, and their successes. It's not a requirement, but it is a great relationship opportunity for many of our students. And so oftentimes those letters are seen as a personal statement. It's a statement about your semester. Similarly, you may have the opportunity to apply for special programs that you may wish to participate in while you're in college, and they may require a personal statement about why you wish to participate and what you would bring to the program, what you hope to get out of the program. And so that would be a form of a personal statement as well. And then jobs. So cover letters are really a personal statement. Why do I want this job? What do I bring to the organization and the position? And really personalizing it. As I was thinking about this presentation, I was thinking about a cover letter from someone that I had the privilege of hiring within the last few years, and that cover letter of that individual really made their application stand out. And so cover letters have a really great opportunity for individuals to personalize themselves and stand out amongst other candidates as they're applying for jobs. And so I would tell you that a cover letter is maybe one of the more sort of important personal statements you might have the opportunity to write in your future or now. So what is a personal statement? So most importantly, it's your voice. It is your personal statement. It's not my personal statement. It's not Wyman's personal statement. It's not your teachers or your parents or your siblings. It is your personal statement. So it's really, really, really important that your voice comes through in whatever you're writing. As I get to know students, I can tell when they've written something that has been heavily edited because I don't hear or see their voice in their writing. So it's your voice, and it's important that you keep in mind that it's your voice that stays at the center of anything that you write. And it's your story. Who knows your story better than you? Hopefully your answer is no one, because it's your story. And that means that there is no one better equipped to tell your story than you. There's no one who's better equipped to say why you will be successful in a particular program at a college, or why those scholarship dollars are necessary to help you achieve your goals and your dreams, or why you would be the best candidate for this this job position. It's your story, and you have both the tools, I honestly believe that, the tools and the opportunity to convey to the reader anything that you want them to know about you, and state it in a way that is comfortable and that is comfortable for you and conveys the message in a way that you wish for it to be conveyed. And so that brings us to this next piece, that it's your opportunity to say what you want. So what is it that you want to say? No one should be sort of standing over you, telling you what to add to your personal statement in any of these various scenarios if they are not things that you want to say. But it's also an opportunity to say what your application and your resume might not say. So if, for example, let's say that we're talking about a college admissions application or a scholarship application, and there's a difficult semester reflected on your transcript. Maybe you didn't get the GPA that you wanted, and the academics in that particular semester don't really reflect your work while you're in high school or your potential while you're a college student. And there was something that happened in that semester that isn't possible to see on a transcript. That personal statement is an opportunity for you to share your story in your voice about what your application doesn't show. So if there was something that occurred in a given semester that you need someone to be able to hear, I'm getting a little bit of feedback.
I'm on this camp card thing.
Okay. Is it possible, Alexandria, to have everyone? Okay, cool. Thank you. Again, to say what is not otherwise stated. And similarly, it's an opportunity to say what you want the reader to know. You may not know the exact person who's going to be the reader, but what do you want them to know about you? What do you want them to know about where you've come from, where you are, and where you're going? So just as there are things that a personal statement is, it is true that there are things that a personal statement is not. And so first and foremost, it should not be a story about someone or something else. A personal statement is about you. And although it might be okay to mention other people, it is really primarily something that is about you and your journey, and not necessarily about someone or something else. Generally speaking, a personal statement is not a plea or a request. So this might feel a little, when you think about writing an application or a scholarship essay or personal statement, a lot of times students feel like they need to say why they need money. But in our experience, there are some students who are coached to I'm just going to be blunt about it. There are some students who are coached to tell a difficult story and sort of share their really difficult personal things as an attempt to get money to pay for college. And that's not necessarily what your personal statement should be. Going back to other things, you should be 110% comfortable with whatever it is you're sharing. So if you have a difficult life moment that you would like to share on a personal statement, that has to be entirely your discretion. And we want you to feel comfortable in doing those things and not necessarily feel like you have to share your deepest, darkest, most difficult moment as a reason to request money or admissions to college. And similarly, a personal statement would not be simply a request for money. So at the Scholarship Foundation, we receive a lot of essays as part of our application. And sometimes those essays are just a couple sentences that say, I really need money for college, but it doesn't tell us anything about the student. So it's okay to express the need for financial support without it being the only piece of the personal statement. And a personal statement doesn't have to be an exact 5-paragraph essay. So you might have been coached a lot while you've been in high school by your teachers about what the sort of correct format and structure of an essay looks like. And that doesn't necessarily mean that's what a personal statement has to be. It is possible that it's fewer than 5 paragraphs. It's possible that it's more than 5 paragraphs. But it doesn't have to be an exact 5-paragraph essay with the introduction, 3 points in the middle 3 paragraphs, and a conclusion paragraph. There's more flexibility in a personal statement than that sort of rigid structure. All right, so it is not necessarily a time to use a thesaurus. So this goes back for me to the point about it being your own voice. However you speak and write normally is how you should be writing a personal statement. Use the language that is comfortable to you. Don't try to be someone that you're not. And so if it is common for you to use a thesaurus, that's fine. If you really feel, it's not saying don't use a thesaurus, but this is oftentimes where students will seek help with proofreading a personal statement, and someone else might read it and say, why don't you use this word instead of that word? And pretty soon the student's voice has been lost. So think about how to ensure that you stay authentic to yourself and your voice, even if you use a thesaurus or outside help like a proofreader to ensure that the essay or personal statement is as strong as you wish for it to be. And it's also not a time to be modest, humble, or shy. Think of this as like an elevator pitch. This is your chance to sell yourself. This is your opportunity to tell them anything that you want for them to know about you that they might not find somewhere else in the application. So it's a chance for you to really sell yourself. And so don't be shy about sharing your big success or a great opportunity that you were able to take advantage of. All right, so we want to talk a little bit about the elements of a personal statement. So first and foremost, the element is you. Again, your story, your voice is a critical part of a personal statement, and you need to be the central character. It's your story, and it needs to have a beginning and a middle, and where are you headed? So think about it, where have you been, where are you now, and where are you going? And it should have sort of a concluding piece, even if the conclusion hasn't yet been written. Where do you see yourself in college or after you've graduated, in the example of a personal statement for admissions or scholarships? You really want to include claims and supporting examples. So in the event that you're writing an essay that says something about why you expect to be successful in college, and you are pre-med, for example, you might talk about an AP science class that you took in high school, or the opportunity to participate in a science program in a summer between one of your years of high school, and provide documentation, not like literal documentation, but document what that experience was like for you and how it supports your long-term goals by talking about that and your experience in those kinds of things. You also want to share your vision. So this is, and I feel like I've already said this a dozen times and you probably keep hearing me say this, but this is about you. It's your voice, your story, and what is your vision for yourself? You are sharing with other people how you envision that your future may be, whether that's your immediate future or your long-term future. And so it's really critical that it's your vision for yourself and not someone else's vision for you, and that you're sharing your vision in these personal statements. All right, so how do you write a personal statement? So really, you need to be sure that you have focus. And of course, the focus does need to be on you and your story, but it really also needs to narrow in on one subject. So it can be tempting in a personal statement to tell a lot of different pieces, but it's important to narrow it down to one subject that you really want to convey to the reader who's going to be reading your personal statement. So that might mean that you need to spend some time brainstorming. It's possible that you write a draft and then you go back through and highlight the various subjects and then make a second edit or draft of that personal statement and really focus on one of the subjects that you've identified in your first draft. It's important to address all parts of the prompt. And so we're going to walk through the Scholarship Foundation prompts in a little bit, but a lot of prompts for college admissions and for scholarships, as you will see in just a slide or two, have several questions in one prompt. And so it is common for students to look at the prompt and answer one part of it and leave the other half completely unanswered. And so it's really critical that you thoroughly read the prompt and be sure that you answer all parts. Really like hash it out. How many questions are there? And how do I be sure that I answer each question over the course of my writing? Use clear language. I oftentimes like to talk about when I read essays, when I can really visualize it because they've used language, the author has used language that shows me instead of just tells me, that really does something for me as a reader. So can you talk about, can you use a lot of adjectives and detailed language that will allow the reader to imagine that they're there with you? Sort of thinking about it from a standpoint of senses. Can you talk about smells or sights or sound or touch elements that are part of the story that might bring the reader along with you as if they are there with you? And so using that clear language, being really detailed, adjectives can really add a lot to a personal statement. Check your grammar. So if you were working near me at some point, you would regularly hear me reading out loud to myself when I'm writing an email, especially if I'm writing one these days really early in the morning or very late at night, as is more often the case than I would like to admit. I will read my emails out loud to make sure that I don't have mistakes. And I almost always catch one when I take the time to read it out loud. So it feels a little foolish the first few times you do it, but it's a really great way to catch mistakes by reading it out loud. And I would even encourage that as a practice, not just on something like a personal statement, but on college work or even these last few years or year of high school, reading your essays and other things out loud as a great way to catch any grammar mistakes. And then ask for others to read it. So hopefully you have at least one person in your life who you would trust to read your personal statement and offer feedback. If you have more than one person, that's great. I would be really, really clear with them about what you want them to offer feedback on. So in my experience, when we ask people for feedback on something like a personal statement, it's best to be very clear about what you're looking for. So for example, can you please read this and make sure that all of my grammar is correct? Or can you please read this and be sure that I've thoroughly answered the prompt? Or can you please read this and be sure that it makes sense and follows chronologically? Because what happens far too often is people start to insert their opinion or their own perspective into an individual's personal statement. And that's when you start to lose the author's voice. So as you consider who will proofread your personal statements, I would highly recommend that you think very carefully about who those people might be and be very clear and specific with them about what you want them to offer feedback on so that your voice does not get lost in the edit process. All right, so we're going to walk through a few prompts as an example of how there can oftentimes be multiple questions within one personal statement prompt. And so these are both prompts that are used on applications to the Scholarship Foundation. And although I'm not here to at this particular point especially encourage you to apply for our programs. Many Wyman teens I know eventually do end up applying for the Scholarship Foundation's loan and grant programs. So it's worth knowing that you may elect to apply for the Scholarship Foundation and may need to answer one or both of these prompts within the next year or two. So our first prompt that we use on our application is to explain your interest in college and to have the student tell us where they think it may take them. What have you done to prepare yourself to pursue higher education? So there's only one question mark in that prompt, but there are really more than one question involved. So the first is we're asking the student to explain their interest in college. We want to know, why do they want to go to college? What about the process and the experience appeals to them? And what do they want to pursue while they're there? We then ask them where they think it may take them. So where do they envision themselves as they navigate the college, like their whole college journey? Where do they imagine or hope or envision that it will take them once they've graduated? And then there's that third piece. What have you done to prepare yourself to pursue higher education? So really there are three components of this prompt. And in order to be sure that the prompt has been answered completely, a student would need to answer all three and address all three pieces for the prompt to be fully answered. I also usually like to point out on this particular prompt, so that piece about what have you done to prepare yourself to pursue higher education, we have students who answer this question regularly, and they answer the question by telling us things that we expect that they've done. So they might say, well, I've prepared myself by applying to colleges and taking the ACT or the SAT and filing my FAFSA. That's all well and good, but what we really want to know is, how have you prepared yourself to be successful as a college student? So going back to the earlier example, if I am pre-med and I have taken really difficult science classes while I'm in high school, I want to talk about the fact that I signed myself up for those difficult science classes and that I've achieved, good grades in them, or maybe they were really hard, but I learned how to study for difficult science classes, and I feel that's equipped me to study well for difficult science classes while I'm in college. So there are many ways that a student might possibly take that. It doesn't necessarily have to be academic things. In past summers, I've seen many Wyman teens talk about how the Wyman Leaders Program has prepared them to be a leader on their college campus, or has prepared them to be independent and to think critically. So there are, again, lots of ways that you can address that question, but I think the point that I'm trying to make and taking a long time to make is really just that when you see these questions, sit and think about them for a minute and really consider, what are they really asking you, and how can you be sure the way that you are answering those questions is not necessarily going to tell them something, like you want to be sure that you are telling them something different than what they could find elsewhere in your application. All right, so this is prompt 2, and we're going to do kind of the same thing. So this prompt is for the applicant to tell us about a challenge that they have faced and how they dealt with it. Explain how having dealt with that challenge has shaped you and if it has influenced your education and career path. So again, there are several components to this. So the first is we are asking the student or the applicant to describe a challenge they have faced. What is the challenge? To outline what it was, and then we're asking them how they dealt with it. And this is probably in many, many years of reading responses to this. In this particular prompt, this is probably the piece that a lot of students and applicants overlook. They tell us about the challenge, but they don't really address how they dealt with it. Sometimes they're talking about a challenge that they're still in the midst of, which is okay and appropriate to do. But what we're looking for here is, so undoubtedly there will be challenges while a student is in college. And so in this particular example, we're looking for the student to demonstrate critical thinking skills and creativity about how they took concrete steps to navigate through a challenge. And then we're hoping that that challenge and how they dealt with it may have shaped their character in some way. So we're also asking them to explain how having dealt with that challenge has shaped them. And it doesn't always have to be an academic challenge. It could be a personal challenge or an athletic challenge. It could also be something seemingly like small in comparison to like really significant challenges that we know individuals and families face over the course of their lifetime. So some of the really compelling essays that I've read over the years might be talking about a really hard math class, but the applicant was able to really outline why it was a challenge and how they dealt with it. What were the very specific steps they took to deal with that challenge, and how has it shaped them? So again, like it's almost like, I don't know if they still do this in elementary school or like grade school, but I remember like dissecting sentences, and like it's almost like that, like really breaking out the prompt to think about what are the specific pieces and how do I need to be sure that I address each specific piece. And this one has that fourth component. So has it influenced your education and career path? And in this particular one, that because of that word if, it's possible that the challenge you choose to talk about hasn't influenced your education and career path. So maybe you don't address it for a very lengthy period or portion of your personal statement. You might just say that this hasn't influenced my education and career path, or maybe you can actually leave that part sort of unanswered if it's obvious that it hasn't had an impact on your education and career path. All right, so we're going to pivot and talk about resumes, and I'm hoping we'll have an opportunity at the end for a little bit of Q&A and conversation. So you will see here there's some information linked at the bottom. Resumes I find to be, just to be brutally honest, a little bit difficult sometimes because they're changing, and the way in which many people apply for jobs is so different than it used to be, partially because of services like oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on them. All of the online search engines that allow you to kind of like post a resume and get connected with jobs. So resumes and cover letters continue to evolve, but they're still a really important part of the process of looking for and applying for a job. And in a lot of ways, it's similar to a personal statement. So first and foremost, a resume is a summary of your personal data. So you are telling them about your education and training, about any business or professional experience you've had over the course of your lifetime. And right now that might be part-time jobs or babysitting experience that you've had while you've been in high school or middle school. A lot of times there are high school students who maybe don't have those opportunities just yet, but perhaps you've been responsible for taking care of your siblings every day after school for a certain number of years. And that could very well be professional experience, even if it's family, because you're demonstrating that responsibility and a lot of really key character traits that are of interest to a job or an internship. You're also going to be talking about your qualifications. What makes you qualified for the position that you're applying for? And then you're going to highlight any achievements over your history. So that could be awards earned or publications if you have the opportunity to publish something while you're in high school or college or in the early part of your professional career. All of those things can be really impactful on a resume. But it's also important to capture your uniqueness. So we have a tendency to think about resumes as just like, if you've ever had to like sift through a ton of resumes, it's a lot to look through. So what can you do to really make yours stand out? How can you show your uniqueness and do it in a way that is still professional in sort of what is expected for a resume? It's important that your resume communicates your qualifications. So again, why are you qualified for a given position? And you should address everything that influences those qualifications. So again, let's just say hypothetically, as an example, you were applying for a job in a school maybe, or in an early childhood childcare organization. experience babysitting would be a really relevant qualification to a position like that. Being a student yourself would be a relevant qualification for working in a school one day, even if it's on the other side of the process. So it's important to think about everything that might influence your qualifications, even if it doesn't immediately seem or feel relevant. So when I thought about why you write a resume, it's really an advertisement of yourself. So I would think of it again as self-promotion, which is not altogether different, again, from a personal statement. And it's always a little weird to think about sort of like selling yourself, like what does that mean? But it's a written version of an elevator pitch. You want the person on the other end to read about who you are, what you've accomplished, what you've achieved, what your future goals may be. You want to understand that the person who's writing the resume sees their own skills and strengths and understands what if any weaknesses they have, and is confident in their abilities and their ability to do the job, even if they still have a lot to learn. So it's, again, really important to think about how you frame a resume and a cover letter as sort of that elevator pitch. And so what are the elements of a good resume? So being concise is really, really important. Long resumes are oftentimes, honestly, I think in a lot of spaces, really long resumes are still overlooked. So especially at your age, a resume should really only be 1 page. If you have a lot of experience, you might go over onto 2 pages. And as you get older and you have more experiences and opportunities to include on your resume, some things come off. So I'm just going to be honest. I've been at the Scholarship Foundation for 10 years. At this point, my resume has 2 pages. The overwhelming majority of it is still the work that I've done at the Scholarship Foundation. I have my practicum, my internships from graduate school on my resume, but I took off all my mall jobs from high school and college a long time ago. So it's going to be kind of almost like a rotation. And so you want to keep things concise. Action verbs, you want to use action verbs, and I actually am going to share a list with you in a minute, because I think if you're like me, sometimes you know that there's lots of great verbs out there, but you may not be able to come up with all of them off of the top of your head. Specific examples. So you might say good is, I offered great customer service. Better would be, an example of offering that good customer service, and best might be was recognized in as employee of the month for customer service, and offering a really specific, tangible recognition of the customer service that you've offered. So being very specific. It's also really important to be consistent. So I'm amazed at how often resumes come through where fonts are different, both the style and the size, and that gets noticed. And depending on what kind of position you're applying for, that is an automatic signal to somebody on the other end that perhaps the person sending it didn't pause to take a look and make sure that it was formatted correctly. And that might signal something that an employer isn't going to you don't want an employer to be inferring about you. So it's really important, again, to have people take a look at a resume and offer their feedback. It's important to offer consistent verb tense. So for anything that is no longer an active employment opportunity for you, the verbs should all really be past tense, because they are things that are done and over with. So I offered good customer service, I participated, facilitated, anything should be in past tense if it's in the past. But if it's a job that you are still working or something that you are still actively engaged in, then it can be present tense. So I offer good customer service, I participate in these programs, or I facilitate weekly conversations. And then you want to be consistent throughout the resume based on whether things are past or present. as there are things in your resume that you really want someone to pay attention to, it's appropriate to use capital letters or bold or italic font so that it really draws the reader's attention to the things that you think are most important for them to know. And then simple graphics. So sometimes this might be a border on a resume, or sort of like divisions between parts of the resume. So between the top where you've got your contact information and then your education, and then between education and professional experience, depending on what kind of position you're applying for and depending on your educational background, you might be able to put more graphics, or you might do an even more visual version of a resume. So we see a lot more visual and graphic resumes from students who are pursuing graphic design or computer, IT or animation, things like that, than, for example, someone like myself who has a degree in social work. So it's also appropriate to think about how your educational background and your goals and the position that you are applying for, how you can convey some of those skills in a non-written way through your resume and your cover letter. All right, so this is probably not very easy to read, but there are a ton of action verbs here. And so I would encourage you to go take a look at all of them and keep them as you're working on things like a resume, but also they may be useful for something like your personal statements. I do want to take a minute to circle back to cover letters because I know I addressed them at the beginning, but really when you are writing a cover letter, it's so critical to convey to the reader why you are a good fit for that position and what about you makes you, or what about it makes you like the right candidate. And I can tell you from hiring in my position over the last few years that the folks who stand out the most are the people who can personalize themselves to the position that they're applying for. So because I work in college access, the applicants who can talk about their own college experience, what was hard, why are they interested in a college access position? And I can tell when someone has used a form cover letter and is basically just swapping out my organization's name for another organization's name. Again, if this is kind of like an elevator pitch and if it's a job or internship or opportunity that you are really interested in, it is worth the additional time to really personalize that particular opportunity and convey to them why you're interested, what you would bring to the table, and to personalize it in a way that might stand out to the reader or readers on the other end. So I'm going to pause and I'm actually going to stop share so that I can see faces. Are there questions that I can answer? I feel like I went through that really quickly. And I know that it's a little bit different, Alexandria, than what we've done in the past. So I would be eager for questions or thoughts that folks have.
Yeah, y'all ask any questions. The reason we had Teresa do this presentation is because traditionally for the LC4 trip, we have Teresa come and talk about scholarship essays and how to break them down. But I wanted to make sure we expanded to talk about cover letters and resumes because I know everyone may not go straight to college. Some people may go straight into the career force. So because we're here to support your path and not just send you on a specific path, we just wanted to cover everything. So for my people who may want to, start your own business or go straight into your career. That's why we wanted to cover cover letters because those are really important. I didn't learn about cover letters until college. So hopefully y'all ask some questions about resumes and things so that we can get the conversation going. So yeah, ask away. And somebody say something, are we gonna call on folks and initiate the conversation? Okay. Yayi, anybody has anything to say? All my new folks who we're seeing?
I have a question.
Okay.
So I know resumes aren't like exactly required for, so where would you submit it?
What do you mean they aren't required for what?
For school applications, college applications.
Teresa, do you want to answer that one?
So do you like
Yes.
submit it with your admissions, or if you have to wait for them to ask for it?
Yeah, so I think I don't know that it's beneficial to stress yourself out about creating a resume to go with a college admissions application if they're not requiring it. I would be working on a resume for, like, I would have one ready so that if and when a job or internship opportunity comes along, you've got something that even if you need to modify or adapt it, you've got like a framework that you can go in and modify and use for that opportunity. So again, like just to use a personal example, I've been at the Scholarship Foundation for almost 11 years, and it was probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago that someone asked me for a resume, and I was like, I've been here for 7 years. I haven't applied for anything. I don't have a resume. And my boss was like, Teresa, why don't you have a resume? And I'm like, well, because I'm not looking for a job. But then I had to go back and recreate a resume and think about everything I had done over the last 7 or 8 years. And it was hard. It was so hard.
Yeah.
So now I make a practice of going in and updating it every couple months, not because I'm looking for another job, but because sometimes an opportunity comes along that wants a resume. And so I think the point of having a resume at this point is so that if an employment opportunity or an internship or a scholarship has one, you've got something ready to go. And again, even if you have to go in and modify it a little bit or make some minor adjustments to tailor it to that particular opportunity, you've got the basic framework.
Yeah, it's good to have something to build on. And Ife, some schools may require a resume, all of them don't. So it really will depend on which school you're applying to if they ask for a resume. Now, when you get into scholarships, I know a good few scholarships typically ask more so for resumes. So I think it's good for everybody to begin a resume, just have something to build on. Even if you don't have a job right now, you can still kind of get those thoughts out on if you've been involved with anything in school, anything in the community. Resumes can become tedious. So I'm just letting y'all know ahead of time, if you can just start one to have something to build on, that may help you out. Did that answer your question, Ife?
Yes, thank you.
And there's a question in the chat too, which is about if for that second essay prompt about whether or not it would be possible to write about like mental health or mental illness, and that it could be major in someone's life to overcome. So I will tell you that we have many, many, many students write about mental health because it is something that a lot of folks grapple with, and it is entirely appropriate topic provided that the person writing it is comfortable sharing about it. So I think that's the most important piece for me, is that it has to be something that the author is comfortable sharing and writing about, because they don't know who's going to read it. And so you want to be sure about that. And we don't have anything in so one of the things that we did not touch on in the PowerPoint is sort of the more like technical pieces, or not technical, but so some personal statements are going to give you a word count. They're going to say it has to be at least 500 words, or it can't be more than 500 words. If you have the latter where it says it can't be more than 500 words, you may want to think about that, because if it's something that is a really deeply personal topic, can you do it justice in the amount of space that they've given you? But if they're saying at least 300 words, I can tell you that when a student has written something compelling, I don't care if it's 10 pages, I'm going to read it. So, that's the other piece to take into consideration, is how much space are they giving you, and can you really answer the question the way that you want in the amount of space that they've given you.
That's really
I
important.
have a question.
Yeah.
So I know that you guys are talking about like resumes that you make going into the workforce, but what about college resumes? Like, do you need a college resume for every time you apply to a different college, or do you need a college resume more now? Like, as I'm coming into my senior year in high school, do I need a college resume more now than I would need an ordinary resume?
Okay, so you want to take that, Jesse?
Yeah, I take that. I think it depends on for where you're going for. Like for me, I was going for education. So it was certain things that I had to submit, and it was a resume was one of the things I had to submit, especially getting into the grad program. It just depends on the school requirements. It's not initially for an incoming freshman. I know it's not initially needed, but as you're getting further into your higher education goals, like if you want to go to nursing school or enter the education, what they call it now, the education workforce at some colleges will call it, where they train you to become a teacher. Sometimes they do want a resume, but it all depends on the school. I think it depends on the school and what they're asking, more importantly.
Yeah, you're gonna have different, the older you get, you're gonna have different types of resumes. So yeah, I think what you're saying is you're gonna have a regular resume with talking about your work experience, kind of where you've worked. But then if you're talking about applying for a specific college, you may want to have a sprinkle of the work you've done. And then also you may want to have more of maybe if you've been involved in school or in the community. I know you have a bakery business, some kind of business you have, but if you want to talk more about that, you can add that into your resume. So you may just have different kinds of resumes that you make specific to whatever you're applying to.
Right.
For colleges, I would assume you would have one talking about what you're involved in, so the jobs, and then also kind of what you're involved in your experiences. Teresa, let me know if I was wrong on any of that.
No, I mean, it all makes sense to me. I don't disagree with anything you all have said.
Yeah, because when I was entering the education program, I had to make a resume strictly about my education experiences, my substitution experiences, my practicum experiences, what else? Volunteer experiences that revolved around education. So yeah, it just all depends on the school and what they're actually needing from you.
Yeah, and then we're definitely here to look at it, and if you have questions on, does this make sense to add this for what I'm applying to? We can always look at it and let you know. Yeah, and let you know if if that makes sense to keep or take out. We can always help you with that.
Right. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, I think right now in your senior year, you wouldn't really necessarily be crafting a resume just to get in specific colleges, because a lot of undergraduate institutions are not looking for a resume when you apply. But I think in your senior year, it's important to have one. For example, like when Teresa said, a lot of opportunities came up my senior year for me to do like cotillions and scholarship programs, and to get into those programs for my senior year, I needed to have a resume. Or maybe if I wanted to join an organization my freshman year of college, and they say, oh, you have to submit a resume to be a part of African, associations of Black religions. What did you do in high school? So it would be good just to be having one your senior year to document everything that you've done. Like, I know you've done a lot of volunteer work, maybe stuff with your bakery business, different things that you're doing in your senior year, so you can have it when those opportunities come up and you just already have one. Like, oh, I have a resume that kind of lists everything that I did senior year. So it'll be easy for me to submit it to be a part of this org or this scholarship program. Or maybe if you find like a mentor or an internship. So that's something that I wish I would have done my senior year, is not wait until I was trying to apply for scholarships to have to craft one. So I wish that in the fall I was like documenting everything. So when the spring came, I didn't have to like scramble and remember everything that I did.
Yeah, I also feel like there's kind of a possible elephant in the room right now, because most of us don't know what the school year is going to look like this year. And so there's, I imagine for a lot of high school students, particularly seniors, there's a concern about, either continuity of extracurricular activities, like if you've done them your first 3 years or a year or two of high school, what does it say if you're not able to continue it your senior year, even given the circumstances? Or if you haven't had that kind of opportunity and you were excited to do something in your senior year and now that opportunity may not be available to you. I think that there are some really creative ways that students can think about building out things for their resume, even as we're mostly from home. So can you coordinate or volunteer in a virtual way? Or Can you fundraise, or can you do some kind of self-paced learning, like, or independent learning that demonstrates initiative? I think there are some really great ways that students can do that. And I think there are people who would help you do that both at Wyman or at the Scholarship Foundation, or likely in your high schools too, because these are things that a lot of students are thinking about. And frankly, like, I have 2 young children, and I'm thinking about, like, if they don't get to go to school this year, like, how do I, like, supplement in some meaningful way while I'm also trying to do the rest of, you know, the things that need to be done as a professional and as a parent. So, like, it's important for you to think about that there can be ways to do that without assuming that you're not going to be able to add those things to your resume or to a personal statement or a cover letter because of the circumstances that we're in right now. There are some very creative ways that you could still do that, I think. Yeah.
And then once again, if you can't figure it out on your own, we definitely can help you out, find the words and the action verbs to make it make sense. So we're definitely here to help y'all out with that as well.
Yeah, and there are also some great templates online for resumes. So if you're like, I don't have any idea where to start, like, I know I didn't either, and I don't think I had the you know, resource that was Google when I was probably first doing a resume. So that tells you how old I am. But it's something that you can, like, go look for online and find some frameworks and find something that works for you. So, I mean, even if you type in resume for high school senior, like, you will probably find a framework or a template that is specific for a high school senior.
Yeah, literally, Google is your friend, guys.
Yeah.
Any more questions? We have a couple of minutes left.
I have a little bit of a question. So with everything that's going on in the world, kind of backpacking off of what you were talking about before, do you think that any of these things, like a resume or maybe a personal statement, might, like, carry more weight? Because I know that I've been hearing a couple things coming from colleges with, like, the ACT, because at my school we didn't get to take the ACT yet, and we don't know if we're going to be able to. And so I've heard some colleges saying that they might not weigh the ACT scores heavily. And do you think that any of these, like, things like a resume might carry more weight this year compared to past years?
That's a good question.
That is a good question. So I'm going to answer a different question first, which you sort of touched on by referencing the ACT. We had this question arise with another group earlier this summer about the colleges that are going test optional, which is basically to say that they won't require an ACT or SAT score for admissions. And so I think the important thing to know about that is that test optional means that they won't ding you in the admissions process for not having a test score, but they may still use that information to sway scholarships. So we do not expect that schools are going to adjust their scholarship process much. So I think the first piece is don't not take the ACT or the SAT because you hear colleges talking about being test optional. I think to your question about whether or not resumes or a personal statement might carry more weight in the admissions process, I think it's going to vary from one school to the next. So honestly, there are a number of colleges, including a lot of the local and regional ones like SEMO, Mizzou, UCM, Mo State, they're by and large, they're using a rubric. Is your GPA here? Is your test score here? And as long as you meet their various thresholds, you're in, or you're in provisionally, or you're not in. They're not actually asking for a personal statement as part of their application process, or it's not a required part. The more selective schools probably will have a personal statement, and there they may hold more weight than they have in the past, but it's too soon to say for sure. But it's something for us all to watch very carefully and closely.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry, I wish I had a better answer, but.
It was nice to hear your voice, Shelby. Hey, girl.
Hi.
Anyone else have questions? These are good questions.
Oh, it looks like there is another one in the chat. So will the job position or opportunity always give you a specific formula for a resume and how to set it up? Or is it usually a given that people know what goes on a resume? If the second is true, what exactly should and shouldn't be put on a resume? So that's a good question. So in my experience, jobs do not give you a specific formula. It's up to the person submitting it to kind of know, or to work with somebody who can help them identify what's going to go on there. So like, I think that's the first piece, is that there's lots of help, and we're here to help you figure that out. It should not be something where you feel like you're flying through this solo.
Right.
And as for what exactly should and shouldn't be put on a resume, again, it depends a little bit on what you're applying for and where you are in your educational and professional career. So, at almost 37, my high school job at Lady Foot Locker does not matter. As a high school senior, your high school job, wherever it is, matters, because that's the professional experience that you've got. So I think you need to think about age and stage in life, other experience. You need to think about what you're applying for. And again, so like, I think it was the screen says Jesse. So I think it was Jesse who referenced, like needing to apply for practicum and having everything related to education. So if you're in graduate school and you're applying for an internship or a practicum, it might be appropriate to put the classes that you've taken that are relevant to the internship that you're applying for. So that might be appropriate there. It may not be appropriate if you're applying for a side gig to get a little bit of extra spending money, or to apply for a professional job right out of school. So it really is going to depend a little bit on a couple different factors. But again, there are lots and lots of resources out there to help you.
Yeah, I like that. Age and stage. I like that. That's really important. And pretty much when you look at the job description, Farron, it'll tell you what they're looking for. And then if you have some of those experiences, then you can put that on your resume. So when I was in college, I majored in journalism, but Wyman, I don't do anything with journalism. So I wouldn't put on my resume, I would put in my resume that I, had a journalism major, but I wouldn't include that I had an internship with a magazine, because that doesn't apply to my Wyman position. What I would put is that I worked with Upward Bound years ago. I worked as a peer mentor when I was in college. I would put that stuff in there because it matched with the Wyman job description. So hopefully that helps. So that when you talk about a specific formula, that's kind of the formula. Look at the job description, see if you have some of the pieces that they need. And if you do, you put those things on your resume. And resumes can look different. They have a lot of cool ones. Like we said, once again, if you Google resumes have gotten updated. They look really cute now, different colors and things. So you can definitely look at it that way, but that's kind of the formula. You just look at the job description and then add those pieces to your resume. So that's why we said you probably will have different kinds of resumes depending on what position, what, like Snaps talked about, what internships or what opportunities you're looking for. That's kind of the formula. So hopefully that answered your question.